One of the biggest reasons that math is important in the classroom, and incorporating math is important in the classroom, is that there has been research done that shows that for students for whom math is difficult, that they struggle, to just put them in another mathematics class to go back over the same topics again is less effective than putting them in a class where they do the practical application of what the mathematics is.
Most importantly, I love math because it helps me to learn how to make patterns and size people and fit people. But I think numbers are important because they relate to something, they tell us something, and so it's not just the number itself, it's what is it telling us.
Math is an important tool that students can see the application from the classroom into everyday life. We use math subconsciously, and I don't think students understand that. And if a family and consumer sciences teacher will make the students aware that math is used in cooking, in making clothing, in child development, in interior design, that they can see those applications and probably become better students in math because they can see how it relates to everyday life.
A cohort of mine had, or a co-worker, he taught the class where they build a house of on-site construction, and he had his student that was supposed to be cutting the framing to put the stairs on. And so he told him to cut the stuff, and the kid just sat there for almost an hour staring at it, didn't get what he was doing, didn't know how to do it. The instructor went over and talked about what the rise of the stair is, what the run of the stair is, what he needed to do, how to cut it. And the kid looked at him and he said, "Rise and run? Is that what my geometry teacher's been trying to get me to understand?" And just the fact he built the stairs, he finally went back to geometry and understood how to do rise over run on a quadratic or on a Cartesian plane.
But my experiences with numbers are learning how to do math, learning what numbers do, and then just seeing it in our everyday lives. And of course, because I teach clothing and pattern making and fitting, we use numbers in our class all the time. But we're always dealing in fractions, and we have to measure, and we have to divide, and we have to add, and so we use numbers a lot. The other thing is, one summer I decided to make my mother some drapes. Well, drapes are like rectangles, so you're sewing a rectangle. But that was the easy part. The hard part was figuring out the math. How long do you make them? How much do you add for the hem? How far up to the ceiling do they go? How far down? How much do you add for the top to do your pleats? And I was shocked at how much math goes into something like that. So I love numbers because I love sewing.
Okay, so math in the classroom. We had students make a soup one time, and instead of putting in 1 1/4 teaspoon of bouillon granules, they put in 1 1/4 cups of bouillon granules. Annie was my TA at the time. Tell them what happened with the soup.
It was disgusting. It was so salty, and it was the first time I've ever seen her spit anything out. Usually she's pretty good at like pretending it's okay, but she spit it right out, and it was, I may or may not have kept it to prank the other TAs later, but
Yeah.
It was disgusting.
So the thing with math is we tried to figure out, okay, how wrong did they go? So you have to do 3 teaspoons in a tablespoon, 16 tablespoons in a cup, and you find out that they did 48 times the amount of bouillon than they needed.
Well, I think math is very important, so I try to teach it at home. I try to teach financial principles to my children. So one of those financial principles is the concept of interest. And so we have a family bank, and my children can invest in the bank, and at the end of every month, I pay them 10% interest of whatever account there was in the bank. And this had dramatic effects. You know, children who would spend all of their money all of a sudden started saving. Now there'd be other children who would still spend all of their money. But one thing that happened was that they got too good at it. And I got out my financial calculator and I realized that if I let them continue to invest in our bank at 10% per month, that they would all be millionaires by the time they graduated from high school. So we had to put a limit of $100 on the amount that you can have in the bank.
In my class, even at the college level, one of the things that the students do in SFL 110 is they fill out a paper where they have to double a recipe and half it. And that's math. And it's everyday math. Now, I'm going to show you this because I saw students just show this to junior high kids. They were explaining if you need to half a recipe, okay, say that 4/4 is $1, and half of $1 would be what? Right? 50 cents. And the kids understand that. So you can liken that to fractions. You can liken it to this is a cup of sugar, but half of the cup of sugar would be that.
Okay, my favorite way to teach math. First of all, I don't really teach math, as you would think. Like, we don't have a math class where I give them a worksheet and say, everyone do the following math problems. But you know, now that I think about it, maybe that would be a good idea. To help remind my students how important math is and how fractions work. So the way I teach math is I teach it with real life situations and problems. And so they'll measure, and they'll measure a pattern, they'll measure a body, they'll decide how much to add, take off for the ease, divide it by the number of pattern pieces they're using. So that's how I teach math, is by having my students use it in their everyday work in our classes.
Probably one of my favorite ways to teach math is through practical application. Math and science, the physics of air pressure at a high altitude on how food bakes is very, very important as well. And we processed that and talked about, what a person needed to know in order to fix a uniform recipe. And what's even more funny is even though you have the recipe, if people aren't aware, it turns out differently. So you can take one recipe, have 5 people make it, and if you're not paying attention, it still turns out differently, especially in regard to our altitude. That becomes important. So if a chef doesn't understand at this altitude that there are adjustments that need to be made to that recipe, it's going to turn out different even though the ingredients are the same. So that's kind of a fun way, I thought, to teach the importance of ratio and measuring and using those math principles in cooking.
I think the key in teaching math is to have it be practical, that it's actually related to something that you're doing. It could be in the home while you're making something, and so you're using math for the recipes. We have 12 children in our family, so we always have to double or quadruple or the recipes, and so then that's just natural math.
Women can do math. I just want to say that. Women can do phones. Our phones have calculators. We can run calculators. We can figure it out. Too many women say, oh, I just can't do math. And they leave it to a guy to do math. I'm here to say, women, pick it up, get over it, and do your math. Thank you very much.